Picture this. A young samurai stands in the training hall, his wooden sword still trembling in his hand. He's just been defeated for the 7th time today. His muscles ache, his pride is shattered, and worst of all, his master is watching with those penetrating eyes that seem to see straight through to his soul. The student expects a harsh lecture, perhaps punishment for his failures. Instead, his master does something unexpected. He smiles. Not a mocking smile, but one filled with knowing compassion. The master approaches and asks a simple question. Tell me, when you strike at water with your sword, does the water resist? Does it hold a grudge? Does it fear your next attack? The confused student shakes his head. Then why, the master continues, do you resist your failures? Why do you hold grudges against yourself? Why do you fear the next challenge? This moment would change everything the young warrior understood about strength, resilience, and the true nature of mastery. We live in a world obsessed with success. We're told to think positive, to never give up, to push through the pain. But what if I told you that the greatest warriors in history approached failure in a completely different way? The samurai, those legendary Japanese warriors who lived by the sword and died by the code of Bushido, developed a mental training system so profound that it allowed them to face death itself without flinching. They didn't overcome failure through force of will or positive thinking. They didn't motivate themselves with punishment or harsh self-criticism. Instead, they cultivated something far more powerful, a mind like water. Why coercion doesn't work? Before we dive into the samurai's secret principles, we need to understand why our modern approach to failure often backfires. When we fail at something important, what's our first instinct? We get angry at ourselves. We force ourselves to try harder. We use shame as motivation, telling ourselves we're weak, lazy, or not good enough. We think that if we're just harsh enough with ourselves, we'll finally break through to success. This is the way of coercion, and it's exactly what doesn't work. The samurai discovered something profound through centuries of training warriors. When you try to force your mind into submission, it rebels. When you shame yourself for failing, you create an internal enemy. When you resist your own emotions, they grow stronger. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more force it exerts against you. The moment your strength falters, it explodes upward with even greater violence. This is what happens when we use coercion against our own minds. We create internal pressure that eventually erupts in anxiety, burnout, or complete shutdown. The young student in our story had been doing exactly this. Every time he failed, he would mentally flagellate himself, promising to do better, forcing himself to train longer, pushing his body and mind to their breaking points. And what was the result? More failures, slower progress, a mind so tense and rigid that it couldn't adapt to the fluid chaos of combat. His master recognized the pattern immediately because he had once walked the same painful path. The way of coercion leads only to a divided self, constantly at war with its own nature. The samurai sought a different path entirely. Principle 1. Mizu no Kokoro, the mind like water. The first and most fundamental principle the samurai cultivated was called Mizu no Kokoro, which translates to mind like water. But this wasn't just a poetic metaphor. It was a precise description of a mental state that could be trained, refined, and mastered through deliberate practice. When you throw a pebble into a pond, what happens? The water responds perfectly to the size and force of the stone. It creates ripples proportional to the disturbance, neither overreacting nor underreacting. Then, after the ripples fade, the surface returns to perfect stillness, holding no memory of what disturbed it. This is the quality the samurai sought to embody in their minds. Think about the last time you failed at something important. Maybe you bombed a presentation at work, or said something foolish in front of people you wanted to impress, or watched a relationship crumble despite your best efforts? What happened in your mind? If you're like most people, that failure didn't create ripples. It created a tsunami. Your mind seized onto the failure, replayed it endlessly, created elaborate stories about what it meant about your worth as a person, and carried that weight forward into every subsequent challenge. Days, weeks, even years later, you might still feel the sting of that moment. This is the opposite of water mind. The samurai understood that in combat, dwelling on a missed strike meant death. If you parried an attack successfully, but then spent even a fraction of a second feeling proud of your accomplishment, your opponent's next strike would cut you down. If you made a mistake and then tensed up with fear or shame, your body would become rigid and slow, unable to flow into the next movement. The only way to survive was to develop a mind that could experience success and failure with the same fluid acceptance, responding appropriately in the moment, and then immediately returning to stillness, ready for whatever came next. But here's what makes this principle so radical. The samurai weren't trying to eliminate emotions or become cold and unfeeling. Water isn't emotionless. It's responsive. It feels everything. When you disturb water, it absolutely reacts. The key is that it reacts appropriately and then lets go completely. A samurai warrior could feel the sharp sting of failure, the hot flush of embarrassment, the cold grip of fear, and still maintain water mind. The emotions would arise, move through them like ripples across a pond, and then settle back into stillness without leaving a trace. They didn't suppress their feelings. They didn't pretend failures didn't hurt. They simply refused to let those feelings solidify into stories, identities, or permanent mental scars. The master in our story wasn't teaching his student to be tougher or to care less about his failures. He was teaching him to be like water, fully present with each failure, fully responsive to the lesson it contained, and then fully released from its grip. This is the foundation upon which all other samurai mental training was built. Without water mind, every other technique would fail, because a rigid mind cannot learn, cannot adapt, and cannot truly grow stronger through adversity. Principle 2. Shoshin, the beginner's mind. Once the foundation of water mind was established, the samurai cultivated a second principle that might seem contradictory at first. Shoshin, or the beginner's mind. Here's where the samurai's approach becomes truly revolutionary. They believed that expertise was actually dangerous if it hardened into certainty. The moment you think you've mastered something completely, you stop learning. Your mind closes. You become brittle. And in the unpredictable chaos of real combat or real life, brittleness means breaking. There's a famous story about a renowned samurai master who, after 40 years of training, would still bow to his sword each morning and introduce himself as a student of the way. His disciples were confused. How could someone of such legendary skill still consider himself a beginner? The master explained, "Every morning, I wake up knowing nothing. My sword is new to me. My body is different than yesterday. My opponent today will be unlike any I've faced before. If I approach the day thinking I already know what will happen, I am dead before the first sword is drawn. But if I approach it with the curiosity and openness of a beginner, I can learn from every moment, even defeat." This principle directly addresses how we typically handle failure in modern life. When we fail, we create a story. I'm not good at this. I don't have the talent. I've tried before and it didn't work. These stories feel like wisdom, like we're learning from experience. But the samurai would recognize them as the opposite. They're not wisdom. They're the death of possibility. They're the mind hardening into fixed patterns that prevent growth. The beginner's mind looks at the same failure and sees something entirely different. This attempt revealed new information. What can I discover from this? What haven't I tried yet? What assumption am I making that might be wrong? Our disappointed student had fallen into the expert's trap despite being a novice. He thought he knew how sword fighting should work. He had ideas about what made a good warrior. When reality contradicted his mental model, instead of updating his understanding, he doubled down on his assumptions and blamed himself for not fitting them. His master was teaching him to drop all those preconceptions, to approach each training session as if he'd never held a sword before, to let each failure teach him something genuinely new rather than confirming what he thought he already knew about his inadequacy. The beauty of beginner's mind is that it transforms the entire relationship with failure. Failure stops being a judgment on your worth or ability. It becomes pure information. When a baby is learning to walk and falls down, does the baby think, "I'm a failure at walking, I should give up"? Of course not. The baby has perfect beginner's mind. Every fall is just data. Adjust, try again, discover what works. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we lose this natural capacity. We start attaching meaning to our failures, building identities around our successes and defeats. The samurai spent their entire lives trying to return to that original state of openness. But beginner's mind isn't about pretending you don't have experience or knowledge. The master samurai had decades of expertise. He could read an opponent's intentions from the subtlest shift in posture. He had internalized thousands of techniques until they flowed through his body without conscious thought. Beginner's mind doesn't erase that mastery. It prevents that mastery from becoming a prison. It keeps the mind fluid and open even as the body grows skilled and precise. This is the paradox the samurai lived. Ultimate expertise combined with ultimate openness to being wrong. Principle 3. Fudoshin, the immovable mind. The third principle seems to contradict everything we've learned so far, yet it completes the picture in a profound way. Fudoshin translates to immovable mind, but don't mistake this for rigidity or stubbornness. This is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in samurai philosophy, and understanding it correctly changes everything about how we face adversity. Imagine a massive mountain standing in the midst of a raging storm. The winds howl, the rain lashes, lightning splits the sky, but the mountain remains utterly unmoved. Not because it's fighting against the storm, not because it's resisting or trying to be strong. The mountain is immovable simply because it is completely itself. It has no need to prove anything, no need to react to every changing condition. This is the quality of Fudoshin. When our student faced his 7th defeat of the day, his mind was anything but immovable. Each failure sent him spinning into doubt, shame, and desperate strategizing about how to fix himself. His mind was being tossed about like a small boat in a tempest. Every criticism from his master, every smirk from a fellow student, every ache in his muscles became a storm that threatened to capsize him. He was exhausting himself not through physical training, but through this constant mental turbulence. His master recognized that without Fudoshin, even water mind and beginner's mind would be incomplete. You could respond like water and remain open like a beginner, but if you had no center, no core stability, you would simply be swept away by every wave of circumstance. The samurai developed Fudoshin through a practice that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. They cultivated an identity that was not dependent on outcomes. Most of us build our sense of self on achievements, on other people's opinions, on our latest success or failure. When things go well, we feel solid and confident. When things go poorly, we feel like we're dissolving. The samurai discovered that this kind of conditional self-worth was a form of slavery. They sought instead to root their identity in something unchangeable, their commitment to the path itself, regardless of results. Here's what this looked like in practice. A samurai could lose a duel, suffer terrible humiliation, and even face death. Yet his fundamental sense of who he was remained untouched. Not because he was in denial or suppressing his emotions, but because he had separated his identity from his circumstances. He was a warrior, not because he won fights, but because he showed up to train every day. He was honorable, not because others recognized his honor, but because he lived according to his code, regardless of who was watching. This is the immovable mind, a core of self that external events cannot shake because it's not built on external validation. Think about how this applies to modern failure. You pour your heart into a business venture and it collapses. You train for months for a competition and lose in the first round. You give everything to a relationship and watch it end. With a movable mind, these failures don't just hurt, they threaten your entire sense of who you are. I'm a failed entrepreneur. I'm a loser. I'm unlovable. But with Fudoshin, something radically different happens. The failure hurts. You feel the pain completely, but your fundamental identity remains stable. I am someone who takes risks, who tries, who puts myself out there. This particular venture failed, but I am not a failure. I am the mountain, and this is just weather passing through. The immovable mind doesn't mean you don't care about outcomes or that you become passive. The samurai cared deeply about their performance and constantly worked to improve. Fudoshin simply meant that their inner stability wasn't held hostage by external results. They could lose and remain centered. They could be criticized and remain grounded. They could face death itself and remain themselves. This gave them a kind of freedom that most people never experience. The freedom to fail boldly, to take risks completely, to give everything without the paralyzing fear that failure would destroy them. Principle 4. Mushin, the mind of no mind. As our student progressed in his training, he began to encounter a phenomenon that seemed almost magical. There would be moments, brief flashes during sparring, where everything changed. His master would attack with blinding speed, and somehow his body would respond perfectly without any conscious decision. The sword would move, the footwork would adjust, the counter-strike would flow as if choreographed, yet he had no memory of choosing any of it. In those moments, there was no fear, no doubt, no self-conscious monitoring of his performance. There was only pure, immediate action. This state is what the samurai called Mushin, the mind of no mind, and it represents the ultimate evolution beyond failure and adversity. Here's the paradox that confused students for centuries. How do you achieve Mushin, the state of no mind, through intensive mental training? Isn't that a contradiction? The samurai understood something profound. You cannot force yourself into Mushin. You cannot think your way into not thinking. Instead, Mushin emerges naturally when the other principles have been fully embodied. When your mind is like water, accepting each moment without resistance. When you maintain beginner's mind, staying open without fixed expectations. When you possess Fudoshin, an immovable center that doesn't need to protect itself. When all these qualities combine, something miraculous happens. The gap between perception and action disappears. You stop being someone who responds to situations and become the response itself. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate what the samurai knew intuitively. When we're learning something new or dealing with failure, our prefrontal cortex, the conscious thinking part of our brain, is highly active. We're analyzing, judging, predicting, worrying. This creates a delay between stimulus and response. But when we achieve what researchers call flow state, which is remarkably similar to Mushin, this conscious interference drops away. The more primitive, faster parts of the brain take over, and we perform at levels that seemed impossible moments before. The samurai weren't just stumbling into flow states randomly. They were systematically training their minds to access this state, especially under the most stressful conditions imaginable: mortal combat. But here's what makes Mushin truly relevant to overcoming failure and adversity in everyday life. It's not just about peak performance. Mushin represents a fundamentally different relationship with your own thoughts. Most of us are tyrannized by our internal narrator, that voice that constantly judges, compares, worries, and second-guesses. When we fail at something, that voice becomes vicious. It replays the failure endlessly. It catastrophizes about the future. It creates elaborate stories about what the failure means. This internal commentary is exhausting, and it actively prevents us from learning and adapting. Mushin is the state where that narrator finally shuts up. Our student discovered this during a particularly brutal training session. He had been defeated so many times that something in him finally broke. Not broke in the sense of giving up, but broke in the sense that the part of him that was trying to perform well, trying to look good, trying to avoid failure, simply exhausted itself into silence. In that moment of complete mental surrender, when he stopped trying to control the outcome, his body took over. His movements became fluid, natural, effective. He wasn't fighting better because he'd suddenly gained new skills. He was fighting better because he'd finally stopped interfering with the skills his body had been developing all along. His master saw the shift immediately and nodded with satisfaction. This was the breakthrough that separated competent warriors from true masters. The lesson here cuts deep. Often we're not failing because we lack ability or haven't worked hard enough. We're failing because we're trying too hard in the wrong way. We're so busy managing our anxiety about failure, so consumed with monitoring our performance, so trapped in self-conscious awareness that we can't access our actual capabilities. Mushin teaches us to get out of our own way, not through more effort, but through a kind of skillful letting go. This doesn't mean becoming careless or lazy. It means trusting the training, trusting the process, and releasing the death grip of conscious control that paradoxically makes us less capable, not more. Principle 5, Kaizen, the way of continuous transformation. The final principle that completed the samurai's approach to failure and adversity was Kaizen, which means continuous improvement or constant change. But this wasn't the kind of self-improvement obsession we see in modern culture, where we're always chasing the next level, the next achievement, the next version of ourselves that will finally be good enough. The samurai's understanding of Kaizen was far more subtle and profound. They recognized that change is not something you do. Change is what you are. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat means you are literally not the same person you were an instant ago. The samurai didn't try to improve themselves. They simply aligned with the fundamental nature of reality, which is perpetual transformation. This might sound abstract, but it has immediate practical implications for how we handle failure. When you fail at something today, there's a temptation to believe that this failure reveals something permanent about you. I tried and failed, therefore I am someone who cannot do this thing. The mind treats the failure as evidence of a fixed identity, but Kaizen reveals this as an illusion. The person who failed yesterday is literally not the same person who exists today. Your cells have changed. Your neural pathways have been modified by experience. Your body has adapted. Even if the change is microscopic, you are not the same. This isn't just philosophy, it's biology. The samurai built their entire approach to training on this recognition of constant flux. Our student experienced this principle in a deeply personal way during a conversation with his master after months of training. He confessed his frustration. "Master, I have been training for so long, but I am still the same person who fails again and again." His master picked up 2 cups of tea and handed one to the student. "Drink this," he said. After the student drank, the master asked, "Is the tea still in the cup?" The student looked confused. No, of course not. I drank it. The master smiled. Then how can you be the same person? The tea has become part of you. You are made of different matter than you were moments ago. The training you did yesterday has rebuilt your muscles. The failures you experienced have rewired your brain. You keep calling yourself the same person, but that person existed only for an instant before transforming into someone new. Your problem is not that you cannot change. Your problem is that you refuse to notice that you are always changing. This realization changes everything about how we approach the process of growth. Instead of setting distant goals and measuring ourselves against some imagined future self, Kaizen invites us to simply notice the transformation that is already happening in every moment. You don't need to become someone who can handle failure better. You are becoming that person right now, in this very instant, whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is not whether you will change, but whether you will consciously participate in and guide that change, or resist it and suffer. Every failure, every setback, every moment of adversity is literally reshaping your brain, strengthening your resilience, teaching your nervous system how to handle stress. This is not motivational thinking. This is neuroplasticity in action. The samurai practiced Kaizen not by setting aggressive improvement targets, but by bringing exquisite attention to the small changes happening constantly. After each training session, a warrior would reflect, how is my grip different today than yesterday? What new awareness arose during that last exchange? What tiny adjustment wants to emerge? They weren't trying to force dramatic transformations. They were honoring the natural process of evolution that was occurring whether they paid attention or not. This approach removes the violence from self-improvement. You're not at war with a deficient version of yourself. You're simply shepherding the transformation that is your birthright as a living being. When we combine Kaizen with the other 4 principles, we get a complete system for facing failure and adversity. Water Mind allows us to feel the impact of failure without being defined by it. Beginner's Mind keeps us open to what each failure can teach. Fudoshin gives us a stable center that isn't destroyed by setbacks. Mushin removes the interference of self-conscious fear. And Kaizen reminds us that we are always in motion, always transforming, always becoming someone new. The person who failed is already gone, transformed by the very experience of failure into someone with new knowledge, new neural pathways, new capabilities. You are not stuck. You are a river, constantly flowing into new forms. How to practice Water Mind today? Now comes the crucial question: how do we take these ancient samurai principles and apply them to our modern lives? The samurai had the advantage of training environments specifically designed to forge these mental qualities. They lived in a culture that valued these teachings and had masters who could guide them through direct experience. Most of us don't have access to a dojo, a samurai master, or the luxury of dedicating our lives to martial training. But the beautiful truth is that life itself provides constant opportunities to practice Water Mind, and failure is actually the perfect training ground. Every setback, every disappointment, every moment when things don't go according to plan is an invitation to embody these principles. Let me show you how. Start with the next failure you experience, no matter how small. Maybe you send an email and get no response. Maybe you try to have a difficult conversation and it goes poorly. Maybe you attempt something creative and it falls flat. In that moment, the first practice is simple awareness. Notice what your mind does with the failure. Does it immediately create a story? Does it spiral into catastrophic thinking? Does it attack you with harsh judgments? Just notice, without trying to change anything yet. This is the beginning of Water Mind, observing the ripples without becoming them. You are not your thoughts about the failure. You are the awareness that can witness those thoughts arising and passing. The second practice is something the samurai called the 3 breaths. When failure hits and you notice the mental turbulence beginning, stop whatever you're doing and take 3 deep, conscious breaths. On the first breath, acknowledge what happened without interpretation. I attempted this and it did not work. Simple fact, no story. On the second breath, feel whatever emotion is present in your body. Don't analyze it or justify it or try to make it go away. Just feel it. Sadness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, heat in the face. Let the emotion move through you like water responding to a disturbance. On the third breath, return to stillness. Let the event and the emotion settle, creating space for what comes next. This entire practice takes perhaps 30 seconds, but it interrupts the automatic pattern of rumination and resistance that turns minor setbacks into major suffering. The third practice brings in beginner's mind. Ask one genuine question. Not a rhetorical question loaded with self-criticism like, "Why am I so stupid?" but a real inquiry that opens new possibilities. What did I just learn? What assumption was I making? What could I try differently? What don't I understand yet about this situation? The quality of the question matters enormously. A good question creates space for discovery. A bad question reinforces existing beliefs. The samurai were masters of powerful questions because they understood that the questions you ask literally shape the reality you experience. When you approach failure with genuine curiosity rather than harsh judgment, you activate beginner's mind automatically. To cultivate Fudoshin in daily life, establish what I call identity anchors, statements about who you are that remain true regardless of outcomes. Not empty affirmations, but honest descriptions of your commitment to the path. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who tries difficult things. I am someone who learns from experience. I am someone who treats others with respect. Notice that none of these depend on success or failure. You can embody all of them while failing spectacularly at a specific task. Write down 3 to 5 identity anchors that resonate deeply with who you genuinely want to be, not who you think you should be or who others expect you to be. Return to these anchors when failure threatens to shake your sense of self. They become the mountain that remains unmoved while storms pass through. For Mushin, the practice is actually about doing less, not more. Notice when you're overthinking, over-controlling, over-managing. Notice when you're so busy monitoring your performance that you've disconnected from the actual task. The practice is to consciously release the grip of control for short periods. If you're having a conversation, stop planning what you'll say next and just listen completely. If you're working on a project, stop judging every move and let yourself flow with the work for 5 minutes without self-consciousness. These small moments of releasing control train your nervous system to access Mushin more readily. You're teaching your brain that it's safe to let go, that you can trust your training and instincts. Finally, to practice Kaizen, create a simple daily reflection ritual that takes no more than 2 minutes. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what is one way I'm different today than I was yesterday? It might be physical. You noticed your posture improving, or you felt stronger during exercise. It might be emotional. You handled frustration with slightly more patience. It might be cognitive. You understood a concept that was fuzzy before. The change can be microscopic. In fact, it should be microscopic. You're not looking for dramatic breakthroughs. You're training your awareness to notice the constant transformation that is already occurring. This practice rewires your brain away from the tyranny of big goals and toward the reality of continuous evolution. Over time, you'll stop seeing yourself as a static entity that occasionally changes and start experiencing yourself as pure process, pure becoming. But here's the most important practice of all, the one that ties everything together. Create deliberate failure experiences. I know this sounds counterintuitive, Why would you intentionally seek out failure? Because the samurai understood that you cannot develop water mind in the abstract. You need actual disturbances to practice with. They need to be real enough to trigger your defensive patterns, but contained enough that you can work with them consciously. This might mean trying a new skill where you'll definitely be bad at first. Taking an improv class where embarrassment is guaranteed. Attempting a challenging workout that will push you to your limits. Having a vulnerable conversation that might not go well. Each of these is a training opportunity disguised as a risk. The key is to approach these deliberate failures with the explicit intention of practicing the principles. Before you attempt something challenging, remind yourself, I'm doing this to practice water mind. Whatever happens is just data. My identity is not at stake. I'm here to learn. Then after the experience, regardless of the outcome, do your 3 breaths. Notice what your mind did. Ask your beginner's mind question. Return to your identity anchors. Reflect on how you've changed. You're not doing the challenging thing primarily to succeed at it. You're doing it to train your nervous system to handle failure with grace, fluidity, and openness. Success becomes a side effect rather than the goal. Our student eventually became a master himself, and when his own students would ask him about the secret to handling failure and adversity, he would tell them a story. He would describe his 7th defeat on that pivotal day, the moment when everything seemed hopeless. And then he would say, "That was the most important victory of my life, though I didn't know it at the time. I didn't win the sparring match. I won something far more valuable. I won the freedom to fail without being destroyed by it." Every defeat after that became a teacher instead of an enemy. Every setback became an opportunity instead of a catastrophe. The fights I won with my sword were satisfying, but the fight I won with my mind against my own mind, that was the battle that changed everything. This is what's available to you right now in whatever situation you're facing. You don't need to go back in time and become a samurai. You don't need years of training in a monastery. You need only this present moment and the willingness to meet it differently. The next time failure comes, and it will come because failure is simply the price of attempting anything meaningful, you can meet it with water mind. You can let it teach you with beginner's mind. You can remain centered with Fudoshin. You can release the interference of constant thinking with Mushin. And you can trust that you are being transformed by the experience with Kaizen. These are not just coping mechanisms. These are not positive thinking techniques. These are fundamental shifts in how you relate to your own experience, and they have the power to transform not just how you handle failure, but how you live your entire life. The truth is, you're already a warrior. Everyone who faces the challenges of being human is engaged in a battle. The question is not whether you'll encounter failure and adversity. The question is whether you'll meet those inevitable experiences with the wisdom of a samurai or the panic of someone who believes they should never fail at all. Let me leave you with one final story, because this is how the samurai transmitted their deepest wisdom, not through abstract philosophy, but through lived experience that speaks directly to the heart. There was once a legendary swordsman who had never lost a duel. His reputation spread across Japan, and warriors traveled from distant provinces to challenge him, hoping to be the one who finally defeated the undefeated master. But there was something unusual about this master. After each victory, instead of celebrating, he would bow deeply to his defeated opponent and thank them. When asked why he showed such gratitude to those he had just beaten, he said something that confused everyone. "They have given me the greater gift. I defeated them with my sword, but they defeated my ego. Every opponent reminds me that I could lose, that I am still learning, that there is always someone faster, smarter, more determined. Without them, I would become arrogant. Without them, I would stop growing. Without them, I would already be defeated. I just wouldn't know it yet. One day, a young warrior finally managed to land a strike on the master during a duel. It wasn't a winning blow, but it was the first time in years anyone had touched him. The master stopped the fight immediately, and everyone expected him to be angry or embarrassed. Instead, he began to laugh. Not a mocking laugh, but a sound of pure joy. He embraced the young warrior and declared a feast in his honor. That night, he explained to his students, "Today, I was given a precious gift. I was reminded that I am not my reputation. I am not my winning streak. I am not the stories others tell about me. I am simply a person who shows up every day to practice the way." That young warrior freed me from the prison of perfection. He showed me that I can be touched, I can be surprised, I can still learn. This is the victory that matters most. The victory over the part of me that needs to be invincible. This is the essence of everything we've explored together. The samurai's secret to conquering failure wasn't about never failing. It was about failing so completely, so openly, so consciously that failure could no longer control them. They didn't overcome adversity by becoming harder or more forceful. They overcame it by becoming like water, responsive, fluid, and always returning to stillness. They didn't defeat their limitations through punishment and coercion. They transcended them through acceptance and continuous transformation. The real enemy was never the opponent across from them. The real enemy was always the rigid, fearful, ego-driven part of themselves that couldn't tolerate uncertainty, vulnerability, or change. You are standing at the same crossroads as that disappointed student in the training hall. You have a choice about how you'll meet the inevitable failures that come with being alive and daring to attempt things that matter. You can continue with the way of coercion, forcing yourself through shame and willpower, creating an internal war that exhausts you and prevents real growth. Or you can begin practicing the way of the samurai, cultivating a mind like water that can feel everything, learn from everything, and be defeated by nothing. The path isn't easy. The samurai spent lifetimes refining these principles. But the path is available, starting right now with whatever challenge you're facing today. Remember, you don't need to master all 5 principles immediately. The samurai trained for years to embody these qualities fully. Start with 1. Start with water mind. The next time something goes wrong, take your 3 breaths. Notice the ripples. Let them settle. That's enough. That's the beginning of everything. From that foundation, beginner's mind will naturally emerge. You'll find yourself curious about your failures instead of crushed by them. From curiosity, Fudoshin will develop. You'll discover a center in yourself that doesn't depend on constant success. From that stability, Mushin becomes possible. You'll experience moments where you're no longer fighting yourself, where action flows without interference. And through all of this, Kaizen is happening whether you notice it or not. You are being transformed by every experience, every failure, every moment of adversity into someone more capable, more resilient, more whole. The master's smile when his student failed for the 7th time wasn't cruel. It was recognition. He saw someone on the verge of the most important discovery, that failure isn't the opposite of success. Failure is the path to mastery. Every person you admire, every achievement you respect, every breakthrough that changed the world, all of it was built on a foundation of countless failures that were met with water mind instead of resistance. The samurai knew this truth so deeply that they turned it into an art form, a spiritual practice, a way of life. So if you're struggling right now, if you failed at something that matters, if adversity feels overwhelming, know this: you are exactly where you need to be. You are in the training hall, and life is your master, and the lesson is beginning. The question is not whether you're good enough, or strong enough, or talented enough. The question is simply whether you'll meet this moment with the wisdom of water or the brittleness of ice. Will you flow or will you break? Will you learn or will you defend? Will you transform or will you resist? The choice, as it always has been, is yours. If this ancient wisdom resonates with you, if you're ready to transform your relationship with failure and adversity, then subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of modern warriors who understand that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about learning to fall like water, to rise like the tide, and to keep flowing forward no matter what stands in the way. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us on this path. Because the journey of transformation doesn't end here. It's only beginning. And like those samurai masters discovered centuries ago, the real victory isn't over external opponents. It's over the fear, rigidity, and self-doubt within. That's the fight worth winning. That's the warrior's true path. And I'll see you there.